Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International, episode 213. And Mark Cashman and Ben Kimber, we have been away. The World Cup happened. We lost a great Jonah Lomu, but there's plenty to talk about right now. We're actually live streaming this show. It's a start. We've been taking forever to set this up. But, gentlemen, we're going to fire out a few links and get some questions coming in. And we've got a few already. But firstly, Cash Cow, Happy New Year to you.
Same to you guys. And listen, I was watching a Seinfeld episode early today, and they had the famous Merv Griffin show episode, and I was just thinking that sitting here waiting to come on air. It's a bit like the Merv Griffin show here, really, isn't it? I'm just not sure who's Jerry, who's Kramer, who's George, and who's Elaine. So I'll throw that one back at you.
All right. Well, Ben Kimber, good to see you, mate.
And you, Bronk. I'd just like to say, firstly, thank you to Cashman for turning up. It's been hard to get in the studio, and it's very nice to have him here. He's been a busy man. And you, Bronk, for a great piece of jerry rigging on the streaming. The gaffer tape work was outstanding.
Yeah, so we're actually off the side here streaming. There's a terrible three-way shot of gaffer tape, an iPad Pro to the corner. Anyway, I've reactivated the Ustream account. I think it's like 6, 7, 8 years ago since we last used it. So it's now activated. Fellas, let's get straight into it. We've got a couple of questions we'll get to in a moment. But actually, let's get straight to it, Ben. A couple of guys you might know have
questions from the crowd?
tweeted to RuggaMatrix already on our live stream before we started.
Oh, mate, they're just keen.
They're
absolutely keen.
All right, so let's get into it.
Well, I think it's all about the Six Nations at the moment, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. So who's our first cab off the rank?
First up question was from Andrew Nevitt. England seems to be playing like England always play. Is Eddie Jones really making an impact?
Let's say he's psychologically making impact. Obviously, we've seen his selection. He loves hard heads, and his selection, Casho, with the captain, was probably the most controversial. So what do you think about that? I think psychologically he's made a difference. I can't see too much so far in terms of play, what's going to change. But
It is quite interesting. I don't think Eddie's had the effect that he wanted to have so far. But I think, and I was talking to Mick Byrne, the former All Black skills coach, who's here in Australia now and doing some work with the Sports Tech Academies, which is CEO'd by Rod Kafer. And he was saying the good people that go into organisations, they go, okay, let's stop now. This isn't working, and it wasn't working for England, and I think that's what Eddie's going to do throughout this Six Nations. A bit hard to do at short notice taking over, but Eddie will get the job done. He's tweaking little bits in and around the edges there. Bronk, you spoke of the psychological things, and even the way he talks to players, I think he's sort of making a difference. I think I was reading some stuff today about speaking to the big number 8, Vunipola, and he said, I want you to play like a Tongan. I don't want you to play like an Englishman. So, and that's the mix of people they've got to get there. They've got to have a variety of talent. They can't be homogenous, if you know what I mean, because otherwise they're going to come up with the same results, and that's coming second mostly for England of late, hasn't it?
Mm. I think the question is, how long does it take really for a coach to have an impact on a team? There's guys who've been in that England setup before. There's some new faces. Even a coach with 15 new players or blokes who've been playing for England before will take a while to shape them the way he wants. The biggest impact for Jones clearly so far is off the field, and you've got to love that. I was tweeting at a couple of the English journos I know recently, and it is absolute manna from heaven for a journo. Eddie will have a crack. He said they wanted to thump Italy. He called the way the game would go in terms of 60 minutes tight and then 20 minutes to finish them off. He got what he wanted. I think a victory is all Eddie's after right now. I don't know if he'd be trying too hard to reshape the way they play from day dot. I'm sure there's an element of that, but you've got to work your way into the game and into the team, and I think that will happen more and more over time. It'll be interesting to see the way that what this England side looks like when they come to Australia, and knowing they're going to play a Michael Cheika team as well.
And Bronk, this Six Nations, though, it's been marked by a lack of adventure. What are your thoughts on that? Because some of the games have been very, very dreary. That Ireland-France game was a dead set dirge.
And tight too. Don't forget Wales. Wales, Ireland. Of course, the struggles that England had against Scotland, even though they obviously the better team, but still not rampant runaway victories. In the wake of the World Cup, I'm not sure if any lessons were learnt. I mean, the thing about the Six Nations is, Eddie knows, no bonus points, Ben, so you just got to play for the win, and that's something that our great beloved friend Les Kiss always talked about, that he liked about playing the game. Maybe that's because that was his only choice, but he did love the game. So I don't know. I think we had this pretty good World Cup. Anything's got to be better than 07, but it was a really good World Cup. Eddie's come in, and I think he spiced it up. But whether there's a big change to this team, we'll have to wait until England go to Australia.
Will Eddie take the game that he's playing in the Six Nations when he comes to Australia in June? I'd suggest not, because he just can't. He can't. Otherwise, he'll get lapped.
Yeah, look, I think, as I said, I don't think that he'd be anywhere near the game he wants yet. I think he's had a couple of hit-outs with the guys that he wants to play for him, and it would take time to shape that. There was actually another question there from Jeremy Green. The current levels of the Six Nations, does it suggest they haven't learnt anything from last year's Southern Hemisphere domination of the World Cup? I think it's probably fair that the World Cup last year was a real shock for Northern Hemisphere rugby. They got absolutely annihilated by the South. I think you could probably look at that a couple of ways in terms of this year's Six Nations, that they haven't moved ahead is one way to look at it, but I think they probably all entered this Six Nations a little bit uptight. They had poor World Cups. They need to prove themselves. There's a bit of change. People, there's always this feel that after a World Cup for every team that they might need to refresh and change and move on. And I think they're all probably tight. They're probably playing the games they know and staying a little bit true to form. And the possible breakout exception for that will be Eddie Jones's England, I think, as he gets them more confident.
Absolutely. Adam. Did you mention Adam?
I haven't mentioned Adam's question, no.
So Adam asks, who do you favour to win Six Nations? So you mentioned England. Are you going to stick with that?
Yeah, I'm going to take England. I think, as we've sort of said, there hasn't been a breakout performance so far. Everyone's looked a little tight. And I think if there's going to be a team that has a real mental change in them, that they're going to keep trying to push the envelope, it will be England. And the more comfortable they get with Jones's style, I think there's a big chance for Jones to have a great start to his England coaching career with a Six Nations title, and perhaps even a Grand Slam, maybe. But I think definitely they'll get a more serious ask when they come out to Australia.
The smoking in the mix, though, boys, I think through the whole thing is France. They've manufactured the wins. Their defence is very solid, and you can see a certain unity of purpose in what they're doing. They hit hard, they hit early, they hit late,
they hit illegally,
they hit high, and all those sorts of things that we love about French rugby. They could really test out England and also Ireland, who've been very disappointing, but there's been a change in some of their coaching structure there, and they've also been hit pretty heavily by injuries. But France, I think, in the mix are a big smoky, and with the need not to get the bonus points, I think they're a big chance. You'd line them up in the betting of about 4 or 5 to 1, and it'd be pretty good value, I think.
What do you think about? So what do you think about Ireland? Where are they? What's the road ahead for them?
Well, everyone was talking before the World Cup about the golden generation. They hadn't capitalised, and all these people were doing all sorts of stuff there. They're obviously they have been hit hard by injury. Their structures have changed probably slightly with Les Kiss not being there, but they've just been probably knocked off kilter by that performance in the Rugby World Cup. I think they're expecting to get it through to at least a semi-final, and it just didn't happen. Just didn't happen once they got to playoff phase of the competition. Yeah,
it didn't happen. What do you think, Ben?
I'll probably just go back to that point I made around how all of these Northern Hemisphere teams are coming back in. The likes of Scotland and Ireland, they probably feel they had games where they got a little bit unlucky. England would feel that way, but it's got to really knock any union around, and there is a rebuilding process there. Ireland's an interesting one because I sort of felt like they punched above their weight for a while there. Like they got to number 2 in the world last year, and they were a force to be reckoned with. But it seemed to really the length of the road seemed to really take it out of them. They couldn't quite quite make it to where they'd like to. So how they revitalise after that, I think that's a question for all those Northern Hemisphere teams.
Leadership structures change, of course, with O'Connell not being there. So a lot of sort of turnover. So it's a time of bedding down an Ireland team, really, isn't it? So. They'll be in pretty good nick in about 12 months' time, I think.
And those O'Connell types, they're huge figures. We'll see that to a lesser extent. We'll be interested to see how New Zealand go this year with a couple of their big names stepping down. Not such a big impact for the Wallabies, but you can definitely see the likes of O'Connell as being talismanic for that Ireland team, particularly through their good run.
Yeah, totally agree. The thing about Six Nations, does it prepare England for the hard running surfaces they'll encounter in Australia? And, Eddie's thrown a few things out there. They've got to get fitter to play Australia. They're going to be battling.
Can drop a bomb, can't he?
He can drop a bong. Eddie Jones. Well, it is a tough game, isn't it? So it can drop a bomb. And Checker's going to have to deal with it. I just cannot wait for Eddie to go toe-to-toe with Michael Checker. It's going to be wonderful.
The question has to be asked, though.
Yes, Casho.
Are they going to be serious about here in June, or is Eddie going to be using it as a development tool?
Oh, please.
Because the Six Nations, for an England point of view, I think is probably on a higher pedestal than a summer tour to Australia.
I'd like to predict that Eddie Jones will call it a developmental tour. He'll come out and he'll say, geez, we're just a bunch of strugglers. We've got a lot to learn as a team. These Aussies are the second best team in the world. They're amazing, and we're going to have to do our best. And then behind the scenes, he will give them a red-hot rev-up, and they will leave no stone unturned. He'll play the game. That's one angle he could take, but I tell you what, there's no way in the world Eddie Jones would take a team on tour expecting to just work a few kinks out. I just don't think that's a possibility for him. He's already hit the ground running. He's talked about bashing everyone. He's going to want to smash us.
Well, at the end of the day, they do have the biggest playing base in the world, don't they? So no matter who they pick, they should put up a pretty reasonable fight.
But talking about wanting to bash people, it was really interesting that he picked a player for his captain, which I think came as left field for most of the English press and the English fans, and a guy with a track record of stinking it up. I mean, that really, I think, if anything, set the tone for what Eddie Jones wants to see out of this England side. He picked a guy who's been, in trouble for headbutting, red cards, time off the field, and, probably must have had a serious talk to him, but he wants stink. The stink-eye man wants stink in his team.
Mm. Good news is on our live stream we have 2 viewers, and I think that includes us. So we did surprise everyone, but I think we'll kick
a little bit of promo next time.
A bit of promo.
Who can we cheerio? Who's the other viewer?
I'm not quite sure.
Is it Ewan from Christchurch?
Ewan from Christchurch. I hope everyone's okay too, Christchurch. A few aftershocks from a quake the other day, so let's hope that things settle down over in New Zealand. And of course,
the old Tars are in the vicinity of Christchurch on the weekend, let's up a mountain.
Let's move into the Super Rugby launch. It was held at a place called Wet and Wild in Australia, like a big water theme park. I have no idea why that was the case, but most of the big guns were over.
Sounds like Maroubra on Saturday night, Bronk.
Yeah, it's fantastic down here. I hope your car's okay out the front. By
my new car, my new Mazda CX-7, bought through my company.
We're sponsored again, are we? Jesus.
No, not yet. But a few teams, preparations on the way, a few trial games. You've had your ear close to the ground, Cash Cow. What's happening in Super Rugby land as our correspondent for the new Japanese team?
Yeah, well, Japanese team, don't put any money on them. I just saw an infographic from SA Rugby magazine. The Japanese team will be the team that travels the most kilometres throughout the Super Rugby season, followed closely by the Jaguars from Argentina, who I think will be a bit of a smoky throughout the competition. From an Australian point of view, I think it's going to revolve around the Brumbies and the Waratahs. Take your pick on who you like there, but I think the Brumbies have to really do a bit of action this year because I think that team may well go to go off to the horizons of the rugby world after this year. David Pocock, I'd be surprised if he's in Australian rugby in 2017.
Not for the money they're throwing around, apparently.
Well, it's not for him. It's not so much the money. It's the challenge of doing something, whether it's something different, whether it's study or whatever. Yeah. The Tars, of course. betting in a new coach in Daryl Gibson. A lot of new players there, a lot of good players still there, but we'll see how they sort of front up. Their scrum's got to work, their line-out's got to work, and even last year it was a bit wobbly at times, that set piece, and that sort of came against them. The Reds, going to be a tough year. The Force, who knows what's going to happen there.
There's breaking news. We're up to 3 viewers in our live stream, so
50% increase.
Look,
in the last couple of minutes.
Like in the next
year on year. Yeah, that's right.
In the next 15 minutes, we'll absolutely clean up. We'll be into double figures. I mean, what are your thoughts, Ben, on just the season ahead and just how much the logistics are going to stretch these Southern Hemisphere teams? It almost seems to me that we're going back to those early days of South Africa battling for that distance to compete on a weekly basis, because there was no other sport that was like Super Rugby in the early days, was there?
No, that's right. And I got to say, I just feel a bit of unease about it. We talked about it a bit last year, sort of saying, how far can you push the envelope? 18 teams. That the SMH guys did a nice little quiz on the site the other day, Sydney Morning Herald, where you had to take a quiz on on the structure of the new Super 18. I think I got 4 out of 10, so don't ask me any questions on how the bloody conference works. But really, the sense of unease for me started yesterday or today when I saw 5 Super Rugby players for Australia standing on a wet, slippery slope promoting the game at Wet and Wild. I thought one of these blokes is going to fall straight on their backside in a minute, and that'll be a really good look. But for me, the sense of unease really is in that I think the competition, we're going to find out whether it's taken that step too far, whether it's going to be too complex. We're going to have a couple of teams that are unknowns, and I think the Sunwolves are going to get absolutely shellacked, which is not going to be a good sign for anyone. You mentioned their travel. They're doing 2 trips to South Africa in their draw, so it's tough enough to get a team together, let alone respond to that kind of stuff. But in Australian rugby, the Tars have been going well the last couple of years. They've got some question marks now with Daryl Gibson. How's he going to handle it? Is he going to be the kind of coach who can handle the pressure of being a New South Wales coach? And there is pressure there. And outside of New South Wales, who are creating their own, or had to handle their own change there, none of the other provinces feel like they're having a fantastic run. There's something sort of over all of them that's like, are they quite there or not? The force of the force and have always been the way they are. Richard Graham at the Reds, well, they reappointed a bloke who's had an absolute stinker. The Brumbies off the field look like they haven't got it together in terms of funding and structure. And the Rebels is not a bad story there, but they're still a junior sort of player, I would say, and they would hope to step up from that. So I don't feel like we're set for a wow. I'd be happy to be pleasantly surprised, but it feels like it's going to be a very interesting season to watch, if I could put it that way.
Just for the punters out there, Dirk, I'm doing a story for the Waratahs First Match program, and it revolves around how the competition works. So I'll send you a PDF of once I've done it. So and it revolves around
at a small cost.
Revolves around 3 numbers: 6, 5, and 4. What you do is you play the 6 games from
clear as mud,
from your own conference. You play 5 from the New Zealand conference, and then you play 4 games from the 2 conferences in South Africa. So if that's confusing, there you go.
You've done a good job. Don't lose our viewers. We're still holding firm with 3 in the live stream.
Hang in there, Ewan from Christchurch.
Oh, there we go. We've got Whiskey Cully tweeting at us saying you're looking good live. So the great Cully from the SMH has tuned in. Hello, mate.
If they only knew what was holding that screen up. No, I think it's good. Look, we just rushed to get this setup together, but I think it's a good plan to go forward, just to interact with people. And the full show will go up later on, of course, looking brilliant in HD. Super Rugby is a competition that struggles for that regional loyalty, doesn't it? And just with those names, the Hurricanes, and they don't want to really reference that to Wellington, for example, and we can do it with the South African teams for sure, which sort of divide themselves off from their local provinces, which we know steeped in history. So we've got a lot of teams, new teams we've got to get used to. A lot of people in the general public in Australia, I know, have no idea what some of these teams or who they represent. And I still think, to me, I think that's an important thing, that regional affiliation. We can say, that's my team. What do you guys think? Is there a big learning process for Sanzar again with all these new teams?
Well, I think after pouring a little bit of cold water on the season and talking about my fears, I think as much as I am concerned about the size of it, it is great that we are tapping into in this competition some really serious supporter bases in Japan and in Argentina. The Argies might put out a team that actually gives a few guys a shake, and that would be great to watch. And the thing we do know about Japan, and we've seen this with Goromao, is that how I pronounce his name?
Goromaru,
sorry, up at the Reds. And
there's a turn up of a book. Me
you're
giving us some pronunciation.
There we go.
Better check that one.
Any Japanese names, mate, we're going to go straight to you.
Yeah.
But Goromaru up at the Reds, and that the media turnout and the fan turnout. And Kasha, you were telling me about this earlier. That I think one of their fan days.
Quarter of the fans were Japanese nationals, and I'm expecting the same at Allianz Stadium on Saturday week. I think it'd be a huge Japanese contingent there.
But what about the crowds back in Japan? We know that it's a different story. I think there in terms of drawing a big crowd on a we'll say weekly basis for the sake of it. But what about in Japan?
Oh, listen, I think most of those games will be pretty close to being sold out. It's at the National Stadium. Filling that stadium in Singapore is probably going to be a different matter. I think there's 2 games or three games in Singapore and some others around the place.
I was there,
but they're obviously going to draw on the expat population in Singapore.
Yeah, I was at a big football tournament in Singapore, and the crowd was very poor. You had Arsenal there, and who else do we have? Stoke, couple of big teams, 4 big teams from the Premier League, or 3 big teams from the Premier League, and crowd was pretty disappointing considering the draw cards of those sides. So I don't know. Singapore's a great place, but I don't know if we're going to see a big crowd there. Great stadium too, by the way.
The crowds that they got through that final series of their top league over in Japan, which was won by Robbie Dean's team, the Panasonic Wild Knights or whatever they were, and
Wild Knights, mate.
It was
that
a
was
wild
after
night.
the game.
It was a wild night. So it was pretty sort of packed out throughout the entire series, and I think they'll have your typical Japanese crowd, absolutely packed to the rafters, and everyone waving a flag when they're told to wave a flag. So yeah.
Might have to check in with your mate Gibbo on some of this, but because the really long range view that I have of Japanese rugby is that it is propped up by company money. That there's a lot of company money behind it, and you wonder just how deep it goes. But then you hear about the support that Eddie Jones and the national team got when he was there, and Goromaru and the size of the support base for him. And by all accounts in the media the last few days, they've been talking about him as the best played rugby player in the world because of the sponsorship that comes out of Japan. So as I was touching on before, I think yes, Duro, your point around the regionality. Well, there's 2 teams now which could potentially get nations behind them, and that's an exciting thing. We still struggle with some of those teams and how they can engage with the local populace, I think, through the names. But yeah, there could be something good going on there.
One of the things about the structure in Japanese rugby is the fact that the companies are the ones that are actually running the game over there. And the Japan Rugby Union had little or no effect on the game over there. It was only Beaver doing his work over there, good old Eddie. But that's one of the reasons why the Sunwolves took so long to get up and running, because it took them that long to actually come to some agreement with the big company rugby club structures there. So interesting little scenario they've got to work their way through.
Well, they've always had that problem in England too, haven't they? Club versus country a fair bit.
Yeah.
They've often butted heads on a few different things, and even in France, I think they've had a bit of that at times as well.
Sorry, guys, I've just been.
You've been tweeting while you're supposed to be talking to us.
Yeah, I'm trying to get.
I'll go to another question.
I've been trying to increase our live stream numbers. I've put it on Facebook. We actually might get a few, even though we haven't got that much longer to go.
All right, I got a question from Rob. What does Pocock?
Hello, Rob.
What does Pocock Gill Tamua leaving Australian rugby say about its current status in the pecking order?
Liam Gill. You wanted to talk about him.
I did want to talk about Liam Gill. Should I talk about him now?
How fortuitous that you have that message.
That is a nice question. It throws to one of the things I did want to talk about.
All right. The stage is all yours, Ben
I want to
Kimber.
talk about rubbish PR quotes from rugby players and how much they annoy me. And it's much easier now that I'm not a journo and I've got to drag quotes out of them. So it's much easier to be upset about them or getting offended by some media guy who's trying to get me out of par. But Liam Gill came out and he's signed to go overseas, and you know what? Good luck to him. You know, I think one of the great things about being a rugby player, these guys, they have the opportunity to you know, earn money, travel the world, go live in a far-flung part of the world. I think that's sensational. But the quotes that he gave when he announced that he was leaving included stuff like, "I think I've achieved everything I can or I wanted to in Australian rugby," and I just thought that was a ridiculous thing to say for a bloke who's never quite cracked it. You know, for mine, yeah, he was on the bench in 2011 when the Reds won the title there, and he's had a bit of a good run and been there or thereabouts. You know, in terms of
How old is he?
Well, he debuted in 2011, so he's only young. He must only be sort of mid 20s. You assume he's going to be back, right?
Yeah.
But I just thought it sounded like someone just pulled out the old bingo board of quotes and said, "Here you go, Liam. Read a few of these before you go off, mate." The short answer is, what a great opportunity. I hope to come back, is what you want to hear from him. Something more realistic. But maybe that's just me.
Well, listen, I've got to agree with you, Dirk. I think those days of being coached to say that sort of stuff are gone. What you want is honesty from these sort of people, and you want some insight into how they tick and all that sort of stuff, you know. But what a great opportunity going to that particular club in southern France and just sort of, you know, going from there and experiencing game day in Toulon, you know, heading up to Paris, playing in Brive, you know, some of those other things. It'll have a lifetime of memories for him, really. So you know, that's the thing he probably should have focused on, really.
Yeah, so and to answer Rob's question around those guys leaving in the pecking order, look, I think that'll be interesting. I mean, we've always sort of struggled. Australia's never really had the capacity to field two strong teams. You know, it's always been we've had one strong team and some reasonable support around that. So to lose guys who are at a certain age and you know, and are taking that opportunity for reasons other than money sometimes. You know, I think Tamua came out and said it was more about the experience. Pocock's thinking more about the experience, though the ridiculous money would help there as well. And I think Gill would be the same, young bloke and getting a great experience like that. But it's going to be very interesting to see how our depth is tested there. Those guys who, with the exception of Pocock, Tamua he was in and out of the starting 15. You feel like we can cover him. Liam Gill, he was good depth for us, but he's not going to be an enormous loss. But it just means, you know, you get an injury here or there, or you want to change things up, or those guys might have the breakout year where they became the main man. We're not going to see that. So I think it is an impact for us, but it's not quite the same as a New Zealand team losing a McCaw and a Carter.
I believe with the Pocock thing, he has to go, you know, like he has to follow his heart. He was always going to do something like that at some stage, wasn't he? He was going to go, I want to go and do A, B and C overseas and save the world, or, you know, whatever, save the whales or whatever, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's following his heart, and, you know, obviously rugby at this particular point in time for next year, and, you know, the toll it's taken on his body and all that sort of stuff. It's it gives you time to reflect on all those sort of things, and I reckon good luck to him. I can't understand in some ways the attitude of the Brumbies. You know, they're trying to corral him into agreeing for sort of one more year. I think he should be let go with goodwill humming in his ears.
And that's what rugby's about. Rugby union is not like many other sports, and we've seen it with some of the efforts by players who go overseas to experience what it's like to play for a French team or an Irish team or whatever, and still can come back and play a part in Australian rugby, or if they're Kiwis doing the same sort of thing overseas, playing in another competition. What David Pocock wants to do, I mean, he should do it. I mean, he's earned the right to do that anyway. And in fact, it doesn't even matter if he's earned the right or not. He can just do whatever he wants. But rugby should be the game that encourages people to explore the world and enjoy life and bring that culture back to the game.
Prime example,
That's
Bronk.
the important thing. Bring a world culture and of decency into the game. More rounded players really off the field generally make better decisions on the field. I've got no doubt about that. What do you reckon, Ben?
Prime example, Dean Mumm came back, played in a Rugby World Cup, and obviously he's pretty close to starting against England. He went to Exeter, was there for 3 years, ended up being their captain, highly respected in that particular area, and his game came on. His game really sort of came on, because I think he was stagnating before he left here.
Yeah, it is one of the best things about rugby. I enjoy my rugby league, but why do they have a Tri-Nations and a World Cup? Doesn't make any sense. There's not enough going on at a Rugby World Cup to be anything to talk about. The richness of the game around the world is what's going to keep it up there and keep it going for us. And I quite like to see these guys go out there, and come back. I just don't like to see the rubbish quotes when they do go.
I agree with you there, and I think Liam Gill has got much more to offer to the game in Australia, and I think he just has to say, he didn't have to manufacture anything. He should have just said, I'm going. And
what will be interesting is if this continues happening, as it's bound to, right? The world's getting smaller. There's more money over there, all that kind of rubbish. But if they start to look at adjusting Giddo's law, if they start to try to bring down the number of games and the amount of service that you've got to get before you can get picked for Australia, it's kind of inevitable. You see it with South Africa, and you can see it with England. I think I saw a story today that Cipriani's signed back into English rugby, or moved, in English rugby back to Wasps. Is that his home club? Took a bit less money than he'd get in France because he wants to stay in English contention.
Yeah,
and that's really interesting, because you'd think if they're just across the ditch there, just across the channel, and you'd think that would be a way that they could keep the strength of the team there by picking the guys from over there, but it's not quite the case.
All right, we've pretty much gibbered enough for the first episode here. It took us about an hour to set up.
And we've used more gaffer tape than I've seen before.
I'm going to Spain on the weekend, so I've been sorting other stuff out.
Yeah. I'll be on the North Shore of Sydney, mate, thanks.
I'm sure. I'll be on rugby research in Barcelona. So just to wind it up, Cash Cow, you made a pretty blatant plug early on that you'll be doing the Waratahs program. So they have like paper stuff, this paper thing. They still sell that?
It's paper and online.
Whoa.
So there's
an
the
app for
tradition
that?
and there's the
Is
new
there an
world.
app for it?
So
is there an app for it?
Not yet. No. No. I think budgets just don't stretch that far at this particular point in time. But we shall see how the year progresses. But saddling up again and just sort of going on from there. So the other thing that I'm doing at the moment is some communications work for Sports Tech Academies. You might have noticed that subtle drop of that name a bit earlier. So there you go.
No, I didn't, mate.
You're
You're dropping more names
That's right.
than you're at a red carpet event for Hollywood. So, yeah, what's that? Who runs that?
Rod Kafer's the CEO. Sports Tech Academies. It's I'll explain it to you one day, but it's ideal for kids coming out of school to up their skills in whatever sport they're involved in.
Right, we only got around a half an hour, mate. So, but that
we're over time already.
It sounds great. It sounds great, Cash Cow. Look forward to that. I want to talk about Cliffy Palu re-signed this year and why that happened.
Because he's the John Farnham of rugby?
For the Waratahs, because I think it's actually a good idea to do that. But we'll talk about that next week. As you know, I won't not have anything bad said about Cliffy Palu.
Great man.
Certainly not.
Great fella.
A big chief of the Waratahs.
He's the main man. Thanks, Cash Cow, for coming in.
Not a worry.
Ben Kimber, lovely to see you.
Mate, I'm excited. I poured some water on the expectations as a Super 18, but I'm glad the off-season is coming to an end. It's going to be great to see some rugby out in the field, see how some of these teams go, and see how some of these Australian players bounce back after the World Cup loss. Yeah,
very good. And we're just down to 2 viewers left
on the live
stream.
Is Ewan from Christchurch not there?
So, no, Ewan's moved to Auckland, I think, or something. But, I think we had about 55 in total on the other stats. So thanks for tuning in on the live stream. We're doing it so you can actually, if we've got some super fans out there who can contribute with questions during the program, we can actually interact with you. The show audio will go up a little bit later tomorrow, and then tomorrow night we'll see the video of the program as well. So if you watch live, you get the exclusive preview.
You might get some fruity cashew language too.
And you do get plenty of fruit.
That's right.
Before the show and afterwards. You're going to see Casho get up in his shorts after this before I turn off the live stream. So you can find us through Ustream on the live stream. It turns out It was my old system, and it's the best. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming in.
No worries, Bron.
That is it.
See you next time.
RuggaMatrix episode 213. We're back for the new year. Don't forget to check out the American guys on RuggaMatrix America. Bruce, Alex, and Pat Clifton calling it how they see it. They take no prisoners, and Alex doing a great job over there. And your coach, John Mitchell.
Interesting.
Yeah, we might talk about that actually.
Stay tuned.
I think we should.
Yeah. I think we should. So I'll get a bit of goss from our American guys too. All right, so that's it for the first show of the new year. Bit untidy. Sorry about that, but we'll be cleaner next week. It won't be till later in the week because I won't be back from Barcelona until
Just drop it in again, mate.
until
Drop it in again.
until later in the week. What do you do? Have to go on for work purposes. That's it. See you next week.